So imagine you have this team, right? Like a team of incredibly brilliant, highly paid software engineers.
Oh, the kind that look absolutely flawless on paper.
Exactly. I mean, they hit every single deadline. Their Jira board is just like pristine, perfectly organized, fully updated.
No tickets lingering in the wrong column for weeks.
Right. And their velocity, the speed they're churning out work, it's actively breaking company records. Management is thrilled.
It sounds like a dream scenario.
It does, right?
Right.
But here is the catch. The product they actually release is completely useless to the customers.
Yeah, totally useless.
The system architecture is held together by, like, digital duct tape.
Mm.
And every single person on that team is quietly updating their resume because they absolutely hate their jobs.
It is the ultimate corporate paradox, isn't it?
It really is. How does a team do everything right by the book but just fail completely in reality?
Well, the answer usually sits in one specific chair, right? The Scrum Master.
Yes. Welcome to the deep dive. We are getting into some wild stuff today.
We really are, because, we build these elegant frameworks to solve complex problems, and then we place human beings inside those frameworks.
And human beings are messy.
Very messy. With all our anxieties, our egos, our survival instincts, we basically immediately begin to warp the system.
Which is exactly what we are dissecting today for you all listening. We've got this really fascinating piece of source material. It's a definitive visual guide detailing 14 specific traps that Scrum Masters fall into.
14 of them, yeah. And it's so interesting because this is the very person whose entire job description is to, facilitate team agility.
Right, to remove roadblocks, foster innovation.
Exactly. And instead, they inadvertently become the single biggest threat to the team's success.
It's wild. But we are not just going to read down a list of corporate faux pas today. Our mission is to completely deconstruct the psychology behind these behaviors.
And just to set the stage for you listening, we know that anytime we start unpacking human behavior in the workplace, there is a temptation to map it onto these grand, overarching psychological models.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I know a lot of you out there who study organizational behavior might be hoping we use today's session to explain the Scrum Master mindset shift through, the impact to human behavior model.
Right, which is an incredible framework for understanding behavioral dynamics, absolutely.
It really is.
But we are intentionally holding off on applying external models today. Our focus is entirely grounded in the core thesis of our source document.
Yeah, we really don't need an outside framework because the document itself provides this profound psychological lens.
It really does.
Yeah.
At the very bottom of the material, it lures out this singular golden thread. Basically, a true agile mindset requires a profound shift away from control, compliance, and activity.
And a shift toward learning, ownership, and value.
Yes, moving from control to ownership.
Which, it sounds like something you'd read on a motivational poster in a break room.
Oh, totally. A cat hanging from a branch, right.
Exactly. But when you are actually in the trenches of a multi-million-dollar corporate project, giving up control is terrifying.
It goes against every survival instinct you have as a professional.
Right. And that tension, between the desire to control the outcome and the necessity to let the team own the process, that is where things start to fracture.
And that fracture usually manifests first as what we call the illusion of control.
Right. Section 1 of our roadmap. The bureaucrats and dictators.
Yeah. When you take a traditional project manager, or really anyone accustomed to traditional corporate hierarchies, and you drop them into an agile environment, the psychological whiplash is intense.
Oh, I bet. Because Agile is fundamentally built on empiricism, right?
Exactly. It's this idea that in complex work, you cannot perfectly predict the future, so you must constantly inspect your current reality and adapt.
But the human brain hates that. The brain wants certainty.
It craves it. So when a Scrum Master is faced with the inherent uncertainty of knowledge work, they often just panic.
And how do they self-soothe?
They weaponize the Agile framework. They turn a system that was designed for flexibility into this rigid, draconian bureaucracy.
Because they can't guarantee the outcome, so they hyper-focus on compliance.
Exactly. Which brings us to the first anti-pattern in the guide, the ceremony police.
Oh man, we have all been in a meeting with the ceremony police.
Think about the daily stand-up meeting. Our source material points out this trap perfectly. We see Scrum Masters who enforce absolutely rigid, inflexible adherence to rituals.
Like, if you don't answer the standard 3 questions in the exact right order.
Or if the meeting goes to 16 minutes instead of 15, they just shut it down.
Right. They aren't looking at the purpose of the meeting at all. They're only looking at the performance of the ritual.
It is a textbook application of Goodhart's law, honestly.
Remind us what that is again.
Goodhart's law is the idea that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So the ritual of the daily stand-up is supposed to be a measure of team synchronization. But when the Scrum Master makes the perfect execution of the meeting the target, the actual synchronization dies.
That makes so much sense. You end up with a room full of highly intelligent professionals who are literally just reciting lines to avoid getting in trouble.
Exactly. They aren't collaborating, they're just complying.
It's like a personal trainer who is so obsessed with you logging your workouts in their little app that they don't even care if you're actually lifting any weights.
That is a perfect analogy. The mindset shift required here is moving from compliance to meaningful outcomes.
Because it shouldn't matter if the team holds their sync while walking to get coffee, right?
Right. Or if they only ask one question instead of three. As long as the outcome, a coordinated plan for the day, is actually achieved.
But the minute the Scrum Master acts as a ritual enforcer, they basically train the team to turn off their brains.
And that leads to an even more damaging manifestation of this control illusion, the Scrum Master who acts as a traditional manager.
The anti-pattern number 2, the team manager.
Yeah, our source material really highlights the danger here. This is assigning work, tracking individual people, making decisions on behalf of the team.
Which is a direct hangover from, like, traditional corporate setups, right?
Yeah, it goes all the way back to Taylorism and scientific management. The manager's job was to be the brain, and the workers were merely the hands.
But in modern software development, or really any complex project management, the workers are the brains.
Precisely. The shift here has to be from control to self-management.
So what does that look like when it fails?
Well, when a Scrum Master looks at the sprint backlog and says, okay, John, you take ticket A, Sarah, you take ticket B, they are committing a catastrophic psychological error.
Because they're stripping the team of autonomy.
Exactly. If John didn't choose the ticket, he doesn't own the outcome.
Oh, right. So if the approach fails, John doesn't feel the sting of failure because it wasn't his decision anyway.
Yeah, he just says, well, I did exactly what you told me to do.
Man, you essentially create an environment of malicious compliance. Or at the very least, just learned dependency.
You really do. You train your team that they do not need to look at the big picture. They don't need to assess their own capacity.
And they certainly don't need to coordinate with each other. They just need to wait for the boss to hand them their marching orders.
Which completely destroys the peer-to-peer communication network that Agile actually relies on.
How so? Like, visually, what does that mean?
Well, you can actually visualize this. In a healthy, self-managing team, communication looks like a mesh network. Everyone is talking to everyone else.
Like, hey, I'm stuck on this database integration.
Right, and someone else says, oh, I touched that code yesterday, let's pair program on it.
Yeah, totally natural collaboration.
But when the Scrum Master acts as a traditional manager, that mesh network collapses into a hub-and-spoke model.
Oh, man, I've literally been in these meetings. Every conversation has to flow through the Scrum Master in the center.
Yes, exactly.
You're staring at the grid of faces on the screen, and nobody is looking at or talking to their peers. Every single update is directed exclusively at the Scrum Master.
Here is what I did yesterday, boss. Here is what I am doing today, boss.
Right, and that brings us to the third anti-pattern, the status collector.
Yeah, that hub-and-spoke dynamic is what the source material identifies as tuning the daily event into a status report.
And the Scrum Master collects these statuses, usually to feed them up the chain to management, right?
Exactly. They transition from being a facilitator to being an information bottleneck.
Why do they do that, though? Just for control?
Because it makes them feel valuable. If they hold all the information, they are indispensable. But they are actively suffocating the team's ability to self-correct in real time.
Okay, hold on. I need to push back here for a second.
So for it.
Because this all sounds lovely in theory, right? But we have listeners right now who are managing real pipelines, real budgets, real marketing schedules.
Absolutely, the stakes are real.
Businesses run on predictability. Marketing buys ad space based on release dates. Sales promises features to enterprise clients based on estimates.
Right, the business side needs dates.
So if I am a Scrum Master and I don't act as what the guide calls a commitment enforcer, which is anti-pattern number 11, I'm basically telling the CEO to just cross their fingers and hope for the best.
It feels that way, yeah.
Don't estimates have to mean something? How
Yeah.
does anything actually get delivered on time?
It is the most common and honestly the most rational pushback in the industry. Yes, the business needs predictability to survive,
Right.
but We have to fundamentally understand the nature of the work we are doing. We are not running a factory assembly line where attaching a car door takes exactly 42 seconds every single time.
Because it's knowledge work.
Exactly. Knowledge work means every problem we encounter is, to some degree, a problem we have never solved before.
So the predictability is inherently flawed from the start.
It is. When an agile team provides an estimate, they are providing a forecast based on the limited information they have at that exact moment.
It's a best guess.
Right. It is a probability curve. It is not a blood oath.
I love that. Not a blood oath.
So when a Scrum Master treats that forecast as a fixed, unbreakable promise, they are ignoring reality. They are demanding certainty in an uncertain environment.
Then what happens when you demand certainty from a team doing complex work?
You incentivize deeply destructive behaviors.
Like what? What does that destruction look like on the ground for you all listening?
Well, first, the team realizes they will be punished if they are late. So they start defensively padding their estimates.
Oh, of course. A task that should take 2 days is estimated at 5 days, just to be safe.
Exactly. Suddenly, your entire capacity planning is artificially constrained, and the business moves at a crawl.
And then what's the second destructive behavior?
When the team inevitably encounters a hidden technical issue mid-sprint, they know they can't ask for more time because the commitment enforcer won't allow it.
So they just cut corners.
They absolutely cut corners. They skip the testing protocols. They write messy, unscalable code just to push it across the finish line by Tuesday.
Yeah, so you get your feature on the date you demanded, but the integrity of the product is totally compromised.
You've traded long-term stability for short-term compliance.
Wow. Okay, so what is the mindset shift our source document demands here?
Moving from predicting certainty to inspecting and adapting.
Inspecting and adapting.
Right. The Scrum Master's role isn't to guarantee a date, it's to guarantee total transparency.
To tell the business, like, hey, we can't predict the future, but every 2 weeks, we will show you working software.
Yes. And say, we can adapt our strategy together based on real data rather than a fantasy Gantt chart we drew 3 months ago.
That is a massive paradigm shift, though. I mean, it is the difference between managing a reality and managing an illusion.
You are trading the comfort of a fake promise for the friction of the truth.
And that friction is uncomfortable.
Right.
Really uncomfortable.
It is, which perfectly explains why, when Scrum Masters realize they shouldn't be dictators, they often swing the psychological pendulum to the exact opposite extreme.
Right. Section 2 of our deep dive, the overcorrection.
Yes. They realize that commanding and controlling the team is toxic, so they decide to become the ultimate servant.
But they completely lose the leader half of the servant-leader equation.
Exactly. They become what we might call the helicopter Scrum Master.
The helicopter Scrum Master. I mean, this is where we see Scrum Masters suffocating their teams with support, right?
Yes. They achieve the exact same negative result, crippling the team's independence, but they do it by doing too much for the team rather than doing things to them.
It's like helicopter parenting. Doing your kid's science fair project so it looks perfect, but ensuring they learn absolutely nothing about science.
That is exactly what it is. It stems from a savior complex. Because, it feels incredibly good to be helpful.
Oh yeah, everyone wants to be the hero.
The source material outlines this beautifully when it describes anti-pattern number 4, the Scrum Master who acts as a team secretary.
Oh, the team secretary. These are the ones updating the digital boards, scheduling all the meetings, typing up the notes, documenting every minor decision.
Right. And on the surface, if I'm a developer, I'm thinking, this is great.
Right. I don't have to deal with Jira anymore. I don't have to look at my calendar. I can just put my headphones on and write code while my Scrum Master handles my life logistics.
It feels like efficiency.
It totally does. But it's a trap, isn't it?
It is the systematic dismantling of ownership. Let's look at the physical or digital act of moving a ticket across a board from in progress to done.
Okay. Seems like administrative trivia.
It seems like trivia, yeah. But psychologically, when you move your own work, you maintain a tactile connection to the flow of value. You are declaring, I have finished this increment.
Right, you feel that sense of completion.
But when the Scrum Master does it for you, the board ceases to be a reflection of the team's shared reality. It becomes the Scrum Master's administrative tool.
Oh, wow. You're alienating the worker from the work. The message you're subconsciously sending is, like, you are too fragile or your time is too precious to manage your own process. You need an adult to do it for you.
Exactly. The shift here has to be from doing for the team to enabling team ownership, because otherwise you are inducing learned helplessness.
And this learned helplessness scales up dangerously, right? Because then we get to anti-pattern number 5, the problem rescuer.
Yes. The Scrum Master transitions from being a secretary to being a full-blown problem rescuer.
Now, this is a tricky one. The source describes this as immediately removing every obstacle without involving the team. But I really want you to clarify this for everyone listening.
Sure.
Because in every foundational Agile training out there, removing impediments is listed as a primary accountability of the Scrum Master role.
It absolutely is.
Right. So if a developer is blocked by a broken server, isn't the Scrum Master supposed to go get the server fixed? How is doing your job an anti-pattern?
It's a great question. The distinction lies entirely in the mechanism of removal.
Okay, the mechanism.
Yes, the impediment must be removed. But how it gets removed dictates whether the team grows or stagnates. Let's use an analogy.
I love a good analogy.
In immunology, there is a concept called the sterile environment hypothesis.
Okay.
If you raise an organism in a perfectly sterile bubble, it never encounters any pathogens. Its immune system never develops.
So the moment you take it out of the bubble, the first common cold it encounters will just destroy it.
Because it has no antibodies, it has never practiced fighting anything off.
Right.
Well, a software team has an organizational immune system. When they face a blocker, let's say another department is refusing to grant them API access, that is a pathogen.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The problem rescuer Scrum Master hears about this API blocker in the daily stand-up, tells the team to sit tight, and spends the next 4 hours on the phone fighting with the other department to get the access.
And they come back looking like a hero. I got the access, you're welcome.
Yes, it feeds the ego of the Scrum Master immensely, but they just acted as the team's artificial immune system.
So the team learned absolutely nothing.
Nothing. They didn't learn how to navigate organizational politics, how to negotiate with other departments, or how to escalate effectively.
The mindset shift here has to be moving from saving people to growing problem-solving capability.
Exactly. So a healthy approach would be the Scrum Master hearing about the API blocker and saying, okay, we have a bottleneck. Who on our team has a good working relationship with someone in that department?
Right. Coaching them through it. How should we frame our request so they understand the urgency? Let's formulate a strategy together.
Yes. You coach the team through slaying the dragon themselves. It might take slightly longer in the current sprint, but you are building a long-term capability.
So the next time that department blocks them, the team won't even need to bring it up to the Scrum Master. They will have the antibodies to resolve it themselves.
Precisely.
But watching your team struggle to slay the dragon is hard. Like, as a leader, you just want to jump in and fix it.
It takes immense restraint.
Which brings us to the final manifestation of this helicopter dynamic, which is anti-pattern number 8, the comfort protector.
Yes. The comfort protector, shielding the team from every difficult conversation or consequence, keeping them perfectly comfortable.
What does that actually look like in practice?
This is the Scrum Master who will intercept an angry stakeholder and lie to them to protect the team's feelings.
Oh, wow.
Or, let's say the team totally mismanages a sprint and delivers nothing of value. The comfort protector will take all the blame in the review meeting, so the developers don't have to face the heat.
It's ruinous empathy.
That's exactly what it is.
If you insulate a team from the consequences of their actions, failure ceases to be an informational feedback loop.
Exactly.
Like, if I make a bad architectural decision and I never have to look the disappointed customer in the eye, I am going to keep making that bad decision.
Comfort is the enemy of growth. The shift here is from comfort to constructive courage.
Constructive courage. I like that.
A true Scrum Master facilitates the hard conversations. They don't avoid them.
Okay.
They bring that frustrated stakeholder into the room with the developers.
They mediate that highly uncomfortable but deeply necessary conversation about why the value wasn't delivered.
Yes. They let the team feel the heat, because that heat is what forges resilience.
And this creates a fascinating psychological domino effect, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because if you have a team that has been perfectly shielded in a sterile bubble, they aren't managing their own work, they aren't solving their own problems, they aren't facing the reality of their failures, they begin to feel a subconscious void.
Yes. They need a way to prove their existence and justify their paychecks.
Right. And this plunges them directly into our next set of traps, which is Section 3, the metrics trap and the cult of busyness.
When a team is disconnected from delivering actual, tangible value to a customer, they inevitably turn to proxy metrics to prove their worth.
Like, if they can't say, we solved a massive user problem today, they will settle for saying, we produced a massive amount of output today.
Exactly. Which brings us to the most notoriously abused metric in modern project management. Anti-pattern number 6, the velocity chaser.
Oh, story points.
The Scrum Master who pushes team story points and velocity as a proxy for success.
It is just a devastating misapplication of a simple tool.
It really is. And, we don't need to get bogged down in the definitions because anyone working in this space knows exactly how story points operate.
Right. They are subjective, abstract estimates of effort.
Yes. They are a thermometer used by the team to gauge their own internal capacity.
But the anti-pattern occurs when the Scrum Master takes that thermometer and tries to use it as a thermostat.
That is exactly what happens. They turn it into a performance target. They go to leadership and say, look, our velocity was 40 points last sprint and now it's 55 points. We are accelerating.
Which triggers Goodhart's law all over again.
All over again. The moment velocity becomes the goal, the integrity of the metric is destroyed.
What actually happens on the ground when they do this?
The team just starts inflating the points.
Of course they do.
A task that they would have called a 3 2 months ago suddenly gets labeled an 8. The velocity chart goes up, management applauds, but the actual amount of working software being delivered remains exactly the same.
It is the literal definition of inflation. The currency becomes worthless.
Entirely worthless.
But beyond just gaming the numbers, there is a much deeper mindset shift we need to talk about here, right?
Yes. The document says we must move from prioritizing output to prioritizing customer value and outcomes.
That is the crux of the issue. You can have a development team working at maximum efficiency, burning through 100 story points a sprint, writing flawless code, deploying it continuously.
But if the feature they are building is something the customer never asked for, doesn't want, and will never use, their output is completely irrelevant.
They're highly efficient at producing waste.
Exactly. Highly efficient waste production.
That distinction between output and outcome is so easy to lose in the daily grind, though, because we are culturally conditioned to celebrate busyness.
Oh, absolutely. Which is exactly what our source material identifies next. Anti-pattern number 12, the busy team celebrator.
The Scrum Master who praises a chaotic, packed board and constant activity.
The cult of busyness is perhaps the hardest corporate conditioning to break.
Oh, for sure.
If you walk through a traditional office or look at digital activity trackers, what gets rewarded? People furiously typing, people jumping from meeting to meeting, people with 20 different tickets marked in progress on their board.
We just equate motion with progress. Like if you're sweating, you must be working hard.
Exactly. But the cognitive science tells us a completely different story.
Right, the cognitive penalty of context switching is catastrophic.
It really is. If a developer is working on 5 different complex features simultaneously, they aren't actually working on 5 things.
They are constantly tearing down and rebuilding their mental models.
Right, losing massive amounts of efficiency in the transitions between tasks.
So it's like bragging about driving 100 miles an hour while going the wrong way down the highway.
That is spot on. This is where queuing theory and Little's law come into play, even if we just look at them conceptually.
Right.
The more work you have in progress simultaneously, the longer it takes for any single piece of work to actually get finished.
So the mindset shift required here is moving from celebrating busyness to focusing on finished value.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, how does a Scrum Master actually change this behavior? If the entire corporate culture rewards looking busy, how do you rewire a team to stop starting and start finishing?
It's tough, but you have to introduce constraints that force collaboration.
What kind of constraints?
A mature Scrum Master will institute strict work in progress, or WIP limits. They will look at a team of 6 people and say, we are only allowed to have 3 items in progress at any given time.
Wow, which instantly creates a bottleneck.
Yes.
So if a developer finishes their part of a feature, but it's stuck waiting for testing, they can't just go pull a new ticket from the backlog because the WIP limit is maxed out.
Precisely. And that forced constraint is where the magic happens.
Because they can't start new work, so they're forced to look at the bottleneck.
Yes. They have to say, how can I help test this feature to get it across the finish line?
It forces the team to swarm on a problem. It destroys those individual silos and creates true collective ownership.
But that is incredibly uncomfortable for people who are used to being lone wolves.
Oh, I can imagine a developer saying, I'm a back-end engineer, I don't do QA testing, I'm just going to sit here and wait.
Exactly. And that discomfort leads to a fascinating symptom, When you push a team to change their core behaviors, sometimes they just learn to mimic the vocabulary of Agile without changing their actual behavior at all.
Right. Cargo cult agile.
Ah.
Which brings us to anti-pattern number 7, the Scrum parrot.
The Scrum parrot. This is the Scrum Master who can quote the framework manual chapter and verse, but rigidly applies the rules without any understanding of the context or the underlying principles.
They know the words, but they can't hear the music.
That's a perfect way to describe it. They demand that the team have a potentially releasable increment every 2 weeks because, that's what the guide says.
Right. But they completely ignore the fact that the team is dealing with a legacy hardware integration where a 2-week release cycle is physically impossible.
Instead of understanding the principle, which is about minimizing risk and getting feedback as quickly as possible, and adapting the practice to fit the context, they just squawk the rules louder.
So the required shift here is moving from framework loyalty to contextual learning.
Exactly. The framework is just a starting point. It's supposed to be a mirror that highlights your dysfunction.
But the Scrum parrot just stares at the mirror and ignores the room burning down behind them.
Pretty much, yeah.
And when a team is trapped in this state, faking their metrics, mimicking the vocabulary, protecting their comfort, the toxicity inevitably bleeds into the actual interpersonal culture.
Which brings us to the next psychological trap, section 4, performative agile.
Performative agile, vibes over value.
Yeah. We've talked about faking productivity. Now we have to talk about faking harmony. The performative side of Agile, where maintaining the vibes of the team takes precedence over delivering value.
Let's look at anti-pattern number 9, the conflict avoider.
Yes.
The source says this person keeps the peace by ignoring real issues and tensions within the team. And the critical mindset shift is moving from artificial harmony to honest conversation.
We have a massive misunderstanding in the corporate world about what psychological safety actually means.
Yeah, tell me about it.
A lot of well-meaning Scrum Masters believe that a psychologically safe team is a team where everyone gets along perfectly, nobody ever raises their voice, and there is never any disagreement.
But wait, isn't keeping the peace a good thing? Like, how do you differentiate between a genuinely happy team and a team suffering from artificial harmony?
Well, if there is no disagreement on a team building complex products, it usually means nobody cares enough about the outcome to fight for it.
Oh, wow.
Or worse, they are terrified of the backlash if they speak up. Psychological safety isn't about being nice. It's about being safe to take risks.
It is the safety to look at your lead architect and say, I think this database structure is fundamentally flawed, and here is why, without fear that you will be professionally retaliated against.
Exactly. A team without conflict is a dead team. Innovation requires friction. Ideas have to collide in order to evolve.
So what does the conflict avoider do when two developers start passionately arguing over a technical approach?
They panic.
They just shut it down.
Yeah, they step in and say, hey guys, let's take this offline. Let's keep it positive. We don't need to argue.
They immediately sweep the tension under the rug to maintain the appearance of a cohesive unit.
But they aren't eliminating the conflict. They're just driving it underground.
Think about the physical reality of this for a second. We've all seen it. The meeting ends with the Scrum Master smiling, thinking they preserved the peace. And then what happens?
The meeting after the meeting.
Yes. Two developers jump into a private Slack channel or walk to the parking lot together and just bitterly complain about the decision that was made.
Because the real conversation happens in the shadows. Because the environment isn't safe enough to have it in the light.
And the resentment just festers.
It really does. The shift to honest conversation requires the Scrum Master to become a facilitator of healthy conflict.
So when an argument breaks out, the Scrum Master should realize it's a goldmine.
Exactly. Their job is to channel that friction away from relationship conflict like personal attacks and entirely into task conflict.
Put the problem on the whiteboard and let the team attack the problem rather than attacking each other.
Yes, exactly that. But leaning into that friction is exhausting.
Oh, it takes a massive emotional toll on the team.
And the common, flawed remedy for that exhaustion leads right into our next anti-pattern. Number 10. The retrospective entertainer.
The retrospective entertainer. The retrospective is arguably the most critical engine of Agile, right?
It is. It is the dedicated space for the team to inspect their own behaviors and processes and commit to adapting them.
But if a team is dealing with deep systemic issues or suppressed conflict like we just talked about, those retrospectives can become incredibly heavy, dry, or awkward meetings.
And human nature dictates that we want to avoid awkwardness, so the Scrum Master tries to lighten the mood.
The source material warns against creating fun activities where no meaningful improvement follows.
Yeah, the Scrum Master starts gamifying the trauma.
Gamifying the trauma, that is so real.
They bring in these elaborate, highly produced online whiteboards. Okay, team, if our last sprint was a horror movie, what movie would it be? Draw your answer.
They spend 20 minutes doing icebreaker games. They order pizzas.
And in the moment, it works. Everyone is laughing, the developers are engaged, the Scrum Master gets a huge hit of dopamine because they feel like they successfully lifted the team's morale.
But they optimized for engagement and entirely missed the purpose.
Exactly. The mindset shift requires moving from engagement to experimentation and change.
Because engagement is merely a prerequisite for a retrospective. It is not the deliverable.
Exactly right. If the team spends an hour laughing about pirate-themed metaphors, but they leave that room without identifying a single, concrete, actionable experiment to improve their deployment pipeline next sprint, the meeting was a complete waste of time.
It's giving the team a sugar rush when they desperately need nutrition.
That's exactly it. The entertainment masks the dysfunction, and the underlying disease continues to rot the team's foundation.
And speaking of that underlying disease, this brings us to the final and, frankly, the most profound section of our deep dive today. Section 5, systemic failures.
Yeah, we have spent a lot of time looking inward at how the Scrum Master interacts with the developers and the team dynamics.
Right.
But to truly understand the failure modes of agility, we have to zoom out. We have to look at how the Scrum Master interacts with the broader organizational system.
And ultimately, how they reckon with their own professional identity.
Let's start with the organizational system. Anti-pattern number 13, the invisible leadership enabler. This one is huge. This is a Scrum Master who coaches the team effectively within their little bubble, but completely evades influencing larger decisions, corporate policies, or systemic blockers.
It's like the glass ceiling of agile coaching.
It really is. It is relatively easy, though obviously we've spent an hour detailing how hard even that is to coach a team of 6 people.
But what happens when that team's agility is fundamentally blocked by the company's annual budgeting cycle?
Right. Or by an HR policy that enforces individual performance bonuses, which actively destroys team collaboration.
A pirate-themed retrospective isn't going to fix a toxic HR compensation model.
Exactly. The invisible leadership enabler looks at those massive systemic organizational blockers, throws their hands in the air and says, well, that is above my pay grade. I'm just here to make sure the Jira board is updated and the daily stand-up happens.
They just surrender to the system.
They do. The required shift here is moving from local optimization to organizational improvement.
And let's be clear about what local optimization really means for you listening. If you have a perfectly efficient, highly optimized agile team operating inside a deeply dysfunctional bureaucratic corporate system, all you have done is created a highly efficient engine inside a car with no wheels.
You are just running faster into a brick wall.
Exactly. A locally optimized team in a globally broken system will eventually be crushed by the system.
The Scrum Master must realize that their mandate extends beyond the development team. They have to become an organizational change agent.
So they have to gather the data on how that annual budgeting cycle is delaying time to market, walk into the CFO's office, and have the courage to challenge the system.
Yes. But challenging the system requires spending political capital. It puts a target on your back.
It is inherently dangerous to your job security to tell the executives that their policies are the problem.
It is. Which brings us, inevitably, to the final trap on our list. The culmination of all this psychological tension. Number 14, the Scrum Master imposter.
The Scrum Master imposter. It is the existential crisis of the profession.
It really is. The document describes this as becoming uncertain over too many months, doubting your worth, and ultimately burning out.
And the mindset shift required to survive this, which is honestly the absolute kicker, is moving from being needed to making the team stronger without you.
Let's really unpack the psychology of this because it breaks everything we are taught about building a career.
Oh, completely.
In almost every other corporate trajectory, your value, your security, and your compensation are tied to your indispensability.
Right. You want to be the only engineer who understands the legacy database. You want to be the manager who signs off on every critical decision.
If the company cannot function without you, you are safe.
Job security through the hoarding of knowledge and power.
Exactly. But the entire philosophy of Agile, the shift from control to ownership, demands the exact opposite from a Scrum Master.
Wait, really? Does this mean the ultimate true goal of a Scrum Master is to essentially make themselves obsolete, to automate themselves out of a job.
Yes, a Scrum Master's ultimate goal is to give away all of their power.
Mm.
If you do your job perfectly, the team internalizes the principles. They learn how to facilitate their own healthy conflict.
They learn how to limit their own work in progress. They learn how to interface with angry stakeholders and navigate organizational politics entirely on their own.
And when they reach that state of true self-management, the Scrum Master is left standing in the room with absolutely nothing to do. The machine is running perfectly.
And that silence, that lack of friction, must be deafening.
It is. The Scrum Master looks at this high-performing team, and the imposter syndrome hits them like a freight train.
They think, I haven't solved a problem in 3 weeks. The team doesn't ask me for help anymore. I'm not doing any work.
Management is going to realize I'm useless. They doubt their value because they are still measuring their worth using the old metrics of busyness and control that we discussed earlier.
Wow. So the burnout doesn't come from working 80-hour weeks. The burnout comes from a profound identity crisis.
Yes.
You have successfully achieved the ultimate goal of your role, and instead of feeling a sense of triumph, you feel completely irrelevant.
Precisely. You have to undergo a total ego death. The hardest psychological hurdle for a Scrum Master is letting go of the need to be needed.
A mature Scrum Master realizes that their irrelevance at the team level is actually their masterpiece.
It is.
So what do they do next? Once they've made themselves obsolete, do they just sit back?
Oh no, they pivot. They take all that freed up capacity and they turn their attention to those systemic organizational blockers we just talked about.
They go fight the HR policies.
Exactly. Or they leave that perfect team and move to a new struggling team and start the grueling, messy process all over again.
But they can never stay in coast.
No, because if they stay, the temptation to invent problems just so they can solve them will eventually turn them right back into a helicopter or a dictator.
What an incredible arc. I mean, we started by looking at the raw panic of losing control, how the craving for predictability creates bureaucrats and ceremony police who prioritize perfect compliance over actual value.
And we watch that evolve into the overcorrection of the helicopter Scrum Master, where the desire to serve metastasizes into a savior complex that strips the team of their resilience.
We saw how a team insulated from reality turns to the cult of busyness, inflating proxy metrics like velocity and celebrating chaotic context switching just to prove they are working hard.
Which naturally decays into performative agile, where conflict is buried in the name of artificial harmony and retrospectives become entertainment rather than engines of experimentation.
And finally, we zoomed out to the systemic reality. That true mastery means fighting the organizational blockers and conquering your own ego to the point where your greatest professional achievement is your own obsolescence.
It all comes back to that golden thread from our source document, moving from control, compliance, and activity toward learning, ownership, and value.
It is a behavioral shift that demands an incredible amount of vulnerability. But when a leader actually manages to make that shift, it entirely transforms what a group of human beings is capable of achieving together.
It really does. It's profound.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But I want to leave you, our listener, with a lingering thought to chew on. Something to turn over in your mind on your commute or while you're making dinner tonight.
Yeah, think about this.
We just concluded that for a Scrum Master, the ultimate measure of success is building a system that functions flawlessly without them. But if you take a step back and apply that lens to leadership in general, if the highest form of professional contribution is actually making yourself obsolete, how does that reality challenge everything you've been taught about your own career path?
Are we all exhausting ourselves, fighting to be indispensable, when the true mark of mastery is fighting to be unnecessary?
Think about it. We'll catch you next time on the